All right, get ready to time travel. Back to ancient India for a deep dive into, well, you might not expect this, the history of chemistry. We're going to be looking at excerpts from a chemistry textbook. Specifically, there's a section that I feel like often gets kind of glossed over, the history of chemistry in India.
And trust me, this isn't your typical, boring textbook read.
No, not at all. Get this, the vibrant paints. At Ajanta and Ellora, those colors that just still blow us away today? They were created using all these sophisticated chemical processes. And get this, mastered by ancient Indians. Talk about an aha moment.
It really makes you question what we think we know about, the
Yeah,
origins of scientific knowledge.
totally. And here's where it gets even more interesting. We're going to learn about Rasayan Shastra, which is the ancient Indian system of chemistry. Now, when you hear chemistry in this context, don't just think about, alchemists trying to turn lead into gold.
Right. Rasayan Shastra, it had a much broader scope. Think medicine, cosmetics, dyes, metallurgy. It was like a whole system of knowledge woven into their daily lives.
And you see evidence of this advanced knowledge everywhere. Take the ancient cities of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. I mean, we often just think of them as ancient cities, but they were actually hubs of early chemical processes.
Exactly. The fact that they were producing, baked bricks and pottery tells us they understood how to manipulate materials and control heat. They were like early material scientists, figuring out all the properties of different substances.
And there's this detail that I find just fascinating, the golden gloss on their black polished ware. To this day, scientists are trying to figure out how they achieved that effect. It suggests that they had a level of control over kiln temperatures that we're still trying to replicate. Imagine the skill involved in creating that.
It really speaks to their deep understanding of all the chemical processes at play.
Okay, so we've got ancient cities, early materials science. Oh, and let's not forget about their mastery of metallurgy.
Ah, yes. Metallurgy in ancient India is truly remarkable. Did you know that copper metallurgy in India dates all the way back to the beginning of Chalcolithic cultures on the subcontinent? We're talking thousands of years ago.
And here's the thing. The sources emphasize that they weren't just borrowing techniques from other cultures. They were developing these complex processes independently.
Absolutely. Take, for instance, the Harappans' technique of alloying copper with tin and arsenic. They realized that by combining these metals, they could make the copper harder and more durable, perfect for tools and weapons.
So it wasn't just about knowing what materials to use, but also understanding how to change their properties through these chemical processes.
Precisely. And this understanding wasn't limited to just specialized crafts. Chemistry was embedded in the everyday lives of ancient Indians.
Right. The Rig Veda, that's a collection of ancient hymns dating back to 1000 to 400 BCE, gives us glimpses into their daily routines. Things like tanning leather and dyeing cotton were just commonplace, implying a really practical application of chemical knowledge that was just a normal part of their lives.
And some of these ancient practices have stood the test of time. Kautilya's Arthashastra, that's an ancient Indian treatise on statecraft and economics, actually describes the process of producing salt from seawater. That same process is still a major industry today. Amazing, isn't it?
It's mind-boggling. So we've got ancient cities, sophisticated metallurgy, and chemistry woven into their everyday lives. What's the common thread that kind of ties it all together?
Well, their written texts hold the key. We often think of the Charka Samhita and Sushruta Samhita as just ancient medical texts, but they're actually treasure troves of chemical knowledge as well.
Wait, really? Medical texts? I wouldn't have expected that. What kind of chemical insights did they uncover?
You'd be surprised. These texts describe the preparation of acids, like sulfuric acid and nitric acid, and even metal oxides. These are concepts we often associate with modern chemistry, yet they were already exploring them thousands of years ago. It really shifts your perspective, doesn't it?
Totally. It makes you wonder if they were even dabbling in what we now call nanotechnology. I mean, we're talking about incredibly advanced concepts for their time.
That's a fascinating thought, and there is some evidence to support it. Think about bhasma. That's the metal ash used in Ayurvedic medicine. Modern science has actually revealed the presence of nanoparticles in these preparations.
Whoa. So they were manipulating materials at the nanoscale without even realizing it.
It's a possibility that really highlights how ancient practices can sometimes foreshadow modern scientific discoveries. And speaking of discoveries, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about something a little more explosive. Gunpowder and fireworks.
Now you're talking. Fireworks are always a crowd pleaser.
Well, the Rasapanashada, an ancient text, actually contains a description of how to prepare a gunpowder mixture. And we have Tamil texts that detail the creation of fireworks, using ingredients like sulfur, charcoal, and saltpeter.
So those dazzling fireworks displays we see today have roots that go back centuries to ancient India. That's incredible. With all this innovation happening, there must have been some serious minds driving this chemical revolution.
Absolutely. One figure who stands out is Nagarjuna. He was a true polymath, a chemist, an alchemist, and a metallurgist all rolled into one.
He sounds like a real Renaissance man, but centuries before the Renaissance.
Exactly. His work, Rasratnakar, focuses heavily on mercury compounds, which had various applications in their medicine and alchemy.
Working with mercury is no joke. So that tells us they had some serious skills and knowledge about chemical properties.
Agreed. And another book, Razarnavam, which appeared around 800 CE, gives us a glimpse into the practical side of their chemical knowledge. It describes various furnaces and crucibles used for different purposes. It even details a technique for identifying metals based on the color of the flame they produce when burned.
That's amazing. That flame test is still used in chemistry labs today.
It is. And speaking of practical applications, we can't forget about Chakrapani.
Okay, tell me about Chakapani. What were his contributions?
Well, he was the brilliant mind behind two significant innovations. He invented soap and discovered mercury sulfide.
So not only was he pushing the boundaries of chemical knowledge, but he was also thinking about hygiene and everyday applications. That's pretty impressive.
Absolutely. And what's even more fascinating is that he made his soap using simple ingredients like mustard oil and alkalis. Talk about resourcefulness.
It really shows how they were able to take their chemical knowledge and apply it to create practical solutions for everyday life. And get this, centuries before John Dalton proposed his atomic theory, an ancient Indian sage named Acharya Kanda was already talking about atoms.
It's incredible, isn't it? And Kanda's concept of atoms, which he called paramanu, went beyond the purely scientific. He described them as eternal, indestructible, and constantly in motion, tying his atomic theory to their broader philosophical beliefs.
So it was a concept that blended science and philosophy. That's really interesting. It makes you wonder how those two worlds informed and influenced each other.
It's a fascinating question to consider, but sadly, there was a decline in traditional Indian chemistry after the introduction of Western practices.
Oh, that's a shame. All that incredible knowledge and innovation just fading away. But wait, you said there was a decline, meaning there's still some of that ancient knowledge alive today.
That's right. And the good news is there's a resurgence of interest in these ancient practices, especially their potential relevance to modern science.
That's fantastic. Who knew ancient India was such a hotbed of chemical innovation? It really makes you rethink what we consider the starting point for scientific discovery, doesn't it?
It certainly does. It's a powerful reminder that there are often multiple paths to discovery, and that valuable knowledge can be found in the most unexpected places. It really underscores the importance of looking beyond the traditional Eurocentric narrative of scientific history and acknowledging the contributions of cultures, from around the world.
I couldn't agree more. So we've talked about their practical achievements, but what about the bigger picture? How did these ancient chemists actually view the world, and how did that shape their approach to chemistry?
Well, one of the things that really sets ancient Indian chemistry apart is its emphasis on interconnectedness. They saw the universe as this intricate web of relationships, and that perspective really informed their understanding of chemistry.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How did that interconnectedness actually play out in their practices?
For instance, they believed that the human body was a microcosm of the universe, composed of the same elements that make up the world around us. So their understanding of chemistry wasn't just about reactions in a lab. It was about understanding the processes at work in the human body, in nature, and in the cosmos as a whole.
So their chemistry was inseparable from their understanding of the human body and the cosmos. That's fascinating.
Exactly. They had this holistic view where different branches of knowledge weren't siloed off like they often are today. And remember how Rasayan Shastra encompassed so many fields? It wasn't just about isolated chemical reactions. It was about understanding the processes at work in all aspects of life and the universe.
That makes a lot of sense. It wasn't just about what things were made of,
Yeah.
but how they interacted and influenced each other. Do you have a specific example of how this played out?
Think about their use of metals in medicine. They had a very sophisticated system for classifying metals based on their properties and their perceived effects on the human body. They didn't just randomly add metals to their remedies. They drew connections between the chemical properties of those metals and their potential therapeutic benefits.
So they were essentially early pioneers of what we now call pharmaceutical chemistry,
Yeah.
carefully selecting and processing metals for their medicinal properties.
Precisely. They developed complex processes for purifying and processing metals to make them suitable for medicinal use. It speaks to the depth of their knowledge and their understanding of the interconnectedness between the chemical world and human health.
This is also fascinating, but I have to ask, with all this focus on like male figures like Nagarjuna and Chakrapani, what about the role of women in ancient Indian chemistry?
That's a great question, and unfortunately, the historical record is often incomplete when it comes to recognizing the contributions of women in science. But we do know that women were actively involved in the study and practice of Rasayan Shastra.
That's good to hear. I'm curious, are there any specific women whose names have been preserved? Women who made significant contributions to the field.
While their names might not be as widely known as some of their male counterparts, their work was no less important. They were involved in everything, from developing new medicines and treatments to creating cosmetics and dyes, shaping the field alongside men.
It's inspiring to think about these women working in the labs and the workshops, contributing to this incredible body of knowledge.
Absolutely. Their stories deserve to be told and celebrated. But sadly, much of the knowledge from this era has been lost or fragmented over time. Invasions, the destruction of libraries, and just the passage of time. They've all taken their toll on this rich history.
That's such a shame. So much potential knowledge lost to history.
It is. But there's still hope. There are many texts and traditions waiting to be rediscovered and studied. Who knows what other scientific treasures are out there, hidden away, waiting for us to piece them back together.
It's like an archaeological dig for knowledge. So, how is modern research approaching the study of ancient Indian chemistry? Are there any new discoveries or insights that are changing the way we view this field?
There's a growing movement among scientists and historians to kind of re-examine these ancient practices through the lens of modern science. They're using our advanced tools and technologies to analyze the texts, the artifacts, and the practices themselves.
That's so exciting. What are some of the most promising areas of research? What are scientists hoping to uncover?
Well, one area that's generating a lot of interest is the study of medicinal plants and their potential applications in modern medicine. Ayurveda has been around for centuries, but now we have the tools to analyze those traditional remedies in detail and understand their chemical properties at a molecular level.
So we're not just taking their word for it anymore. We're actually able to verify the efficacy of these ancient remedies.
Exactly. And the potential for discovering new drugs and treatments is huge. It's like a treasure chest of knowledge just waiting to be unlocked. And it's not just limited to medicine either. Remember how impressed we were with the Harappans' mastery of alloying?
Right. The fact that they figured out how to improve the properties of copper by alloying it with tin and arsenic is still mind-blowing to me.
Well, researchers are now using cutting-edge tools like scanning electron microscopy to analyze those ancient alloys and understand the processes they use to create them.
So we can actually learn from their techniques and potentially apply that knowledge to modern material science. That's incredible.
It's amazing, right? And who knows, maybe we'll even be able to replicate some of those lost techniques and recreate the materials they used thousands of years ago.
That would be a testament to their ingenuity, wouldn't it? To be able to bring back something that was lost for centuries.
It would be a remarkable achievement. And it's all part of this larger effort to understand the interconnectedness of knowledge, to learn from the past, even as we push the boundaries of modern science.
So, with all this research happening, what do you think the future holds for our understanding of ancient Indian chemistry? What mysteries are still out there waiting to be solved?
I honestly believe we're just scratching the surface. As more texts are translated and more research is conducted, I think we'll continue to be surprised by the depth and sophistication of their knowledge. And who knows? Maybe we'll even uncover entirely new areas of study that we haven't even considered yet.
It's like we're piecing together this giant, intricate puzzle. And with each new discovery, we get a clearer picture of the brilliance of these ancient chemists. It's a truly humbling experience.
It is, and it's not just about filling in the historical gaps. It's about recognizing the interconnectedness of knowledge and appreciating the contributions of cultures from all over the world to the advancement of science.
That's beautifully said. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what's the most important thing you hope listeners take away from this conversation so far?
I hope they'll remember that the history of chemistry is far richer and more diverse than what we often learn in textbooks, and that the story of ancient Indian chemistry is a testament to the power of human curiosity and ingenuity. regardless of time or place.
Will said. It's a story that deserves to be told and explored and celebrated. And speaking of celebrating, we can't forget about one of the most fascinating aspects of ancient Indian chemistry, their unique theoretical framework for understanding the world. We've talked about all their practical achievements, but what about the ideas behind it all? Did they have some sort of system for explaining how and why these chemical processes worked?
That's where it gets really interesting. You see, their theoretical framework wasn't just about, practical formulas and stuff. It was deeply rooted in their philosophical understanding of the universe. It's a reminder that for them, science and philosophy, those weren't separate fields.
Okay, I'm all ears. Break it down for me. How did their philosophy actually influence their chemistry?
Well, one of the core concepts was the idea of the five elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. They believed that all matter was like composed of these five elements, just in different proportions.
So like a sort of ancient periodic table, but with like a philosophical twist.
Exactly. But it went beyond just a list. Each element had specific qualities associated with it. For them, the interplay of these elements determined the characteristics of everything around us.
So a substance with a lot of the fire element would behave differently than one dominated by, say, the earth element.
Precisely. They use this framework to explain all sorts of things, from the properties of metals to the effects of medicines on the body. It wasn't just about the elements themselves, but the relationships and balance between them.
So it was a way of understanding the world, like as this interconnected system,
Mm.
where everything influenced everything else. Kind
Yep.
of like an ancient version of systems thinking.
That's a great way to put it. And what's really fascinating is that this system wasn't static. It evolved over time as they made new observations and conducted experiments. They were constantly refining their understanding, just like scientists do today.
That makes sense. Science is all about adapting and building upon previous knowledge, right? But how does their system of five elements hold up against our modern understanding of chemistry? Are there any, points of connection at all?
Well, it's easy to dismiss it as outdated when we
Sure.
now know about atoms and molecules and all that. But if you look closely, there are some intriguing parallels.
Really? Give me an example.
Well, their concept of the fire element with its qualities of heat and transformation could be seen as an early intuition about, energy and chemical reactions. They didn't have the language of modern chemistry, but they observed that certain substances had the power to change and transform others, often through the application of heat.
That's so cool. So even though their framework was different, their observations led them to grasp some fundamental concepts that we still recognize today. It really highlights the power of human observation and reasoning, no matter what time period you're in.
Absolutely. It's a testament to their ingenuity and their desire to understand the world around them. And for me, that's the most important takeaway from this whole deep dive into ancient Indian chemistry.
I agree. It's been such an eye-opening journey, hasn't it?
It has. It's a reminder that scientific knowledge isn't limited to one culture or one time period. It's a global endeavor, and we can learn so much from exploring the diverse ways that people have sought to understand the universe, throughout history.
Beautifully said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our incredible journey to ancient India.
It's been a pleasure diving deep with you.
The pleasure was all mine. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this fascinating exploration. We hope you've learned something new and that you'll continue to explore the rich and diverse history of science. Remember, there's a whole world of knowledge out there, just waiting to be discovered. And sometimes, the most unexpected places hold the most incredible insights. Until next time, keep those minds curious and keep diving deep.